The Raiders find themselves trapped in a season that feels like it ended long before the winter winds arrived. The games are still being played, the schedule is still rolling forward, but the emotional clock has already struck midnight. You can sense it in the conversations, in the body language, in the way fans talk about this team. The discussions aren't about schemes or matchups anymore. They aren't about red zone efficiency or third down conversions. They're about survival. They're about dysfunction. They're about whether this franchise can ever escape the gravitational pull of its own mistakes. That's when you know a season is no longer a season. It becomes an autopsy. Raider Nation has reached that point. Every conversation circles back to the same question. How did it get this bad, and why does it keep happening? Even the occasional bright spots have been drowned out by a cycle of constant turnover, finger-pointing, and decades of wasted potential. It's a painful reality for a fanbase that has waited nearly 25 years for anything resembling sustained success. The frustration inside Raider Nation is boiling over, and understandably so. When an organization builds its identity around a rallying cry like "just win baby" and then fails to live up to it for a generation, the emotional damage accumulates. Fans become desperate for change, hungry for someone to blame, ready to call for firings at the first sign of failure. But the truth nobody wants to hear is that constantly cycling through coaches and coordinators is not a strategy. It's a spiral. The Raiders have burned through talented football minds for years, discarding them before they ever had a real chance to build something. Some of those same coaches have gone on to succeed elsewhere. Others were never set up to succeed in the first place. The one constant through all of it isn't the coaches. It's the organization that never allows anything to take root. You can't build a foundation when you rip up the ground every 12 months. That's why the conversation around Pete Carroll is so important. People act like firing him would magically fix everything, as if there's a better option waiting around the corner. But that theory collapses the moment you ask who could realistically replace him. There is no superstar coach sitting on a shelf waiting to be hired. A first-time head coach would be walking into a grinder, and history shows that most don't make it out of year 2 in Las Vegas. And if the Raiders do somehow land a big name, what makes anyone think the result will be different when the organization has shown no patience, no consistency, and no identity? Carroll has won everywhere he's been when he's given the authority to build. A national championship at USC, a Super Bowl in Seattle, playoff runs, stability, culture. But with the Raiders he isn't fully in control. He didn't choose all of his staff. Some positions were filled before he arrived. Others were forced through internal politics. When you hire a coach with a proven track record, but you don't give him the power to choose his own people, you're setting him up to fail before he even steps on the field. That failure isn't just visible in the standings, it's visible in the emotional collapse of the locker room. Players see the mixed messages, the contradictory decisions, the inconsistencies in accountability. They see Pete Carroll's son coaching an offensive line that has been a disaster, yet still keeping his job while other assistants were shown the door. They see the offense fracture into confusion, with no rhythm and no continuity. They see Geno Smith losing trust, losing rhythm, losing confidence. And they see the fan base erupting in anger over a single moment where frustration finally boiled over. Geno's middle finger incident wasn't smart, and it wasn't excusable, but it was human. When an offense is dysfunctional, when the system is broken, when the quarterback is taking the blame for structural failures he didn't create, the pressure becomes overwhelming. Fans see the gesture. They don't see the weeks of being ripped apart publicly while trying to execute an offensive scheme that could never function with the personnel on hand. They don't see the children and families subjected to the same toxicity. They don't see the weight that builds until it finally snaps. The deeper problem is the structure behind the scenes. The offense has no identity because the staff was never fully aligned. Geno was brought in to run a style that didn't fit his strengths. The play calling lacked cohesion. Routes didn't complement concepts. The quarterback rhythm evaporated. Throws he normally makes in his sleep suddenly looked foreign because nothing around him resembled what he had succeeded with under Pete Carroll in Seattle. The regression was startling, and it shouldn't have been possible unless something internally was broken. Every week felt like a different offense, a different plan, a different attempt to patch over the same foundational problems. Geno played some of the worst football of his career, and it was impossible not to wonder whether he was playing hurt, mentally drained, or simply lost inside a system that never made sense. Meanwhile, the Raiders' head coaching cycle reads like a cautionary tale. Nearly every coach since the 2002 Super Bowl run has been fired within 2 seasons, often sooner. Not because they were the wrong hires, but because the organization never gave them the space to grow. Look across the league and you don't see former Raider coaches lighting it up elsewhere, because many were never allowed to build their own programs. The constant turnover poisoned development. Culture became impossible to establish. Players never knew whether the system they were learning would survive past Thanksgiving. That instability becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Every new coach inherits chaos. Every new staff inherits mistrust. And every firing reinforces the belief that nothing will ever last. This is where the conversation finally shifts to Mark Davis, a figure often blamed for the franchise's struggles but one whose role is more complicated than the easy narratives suggest. Davis is willing to spend. He invests heavily in the stadium, in facilities, in coaches, in staff. There are owners across the NFL who refuse to spend at a fraction of his level. But money doesn't fix structural issues. Money doesn't fix culture. Money doesn't fix decades of instability. Where Davis falters is in the hiring process itself. The Raiders have not consistently hired visionary leaders capable of crafting an identity, and when they finally hired someone who checked that box, they didn't give him the authority needed to do the job. Ownership can provide resources, but it cannot provide stability unless it commits to letting a leader build without constant interference. That's why breaking this cycle is no longer optional. The Raiders have tried everything else. They've tried splash hires, familiar hires, risky hires, experienced hires, first-time hires. They've tried quick fixes. They've tried resets. They've tried half measures. None of it has produced lasting success because none of it has been allowed to mature. Stability doesn't guarantee success, but instability